Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tiki Bar. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Eli Kaufman. He leads revenue operations at Sweep. Eli, how is a spring Friday in New York?
It's good, man. Someone needs to tell the weather. It hasn't really caught up with the time of year yet. It's what, April, mid-April, so we're hoping for a little warmer weather. But it's a Friday, so I can't complain. How are you doing?
There you go. There you go. I'm good. I'm good. Life is good here in Texas. We ask everyone the same question when they started the Tiki Bar. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Probably a baseball player, which kind of tracks with my career path. But I definitely realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to be the case for me.
Okay, so you're a kid growing up in Boston. You want to play for the Red Sox, I know.
100%, yeah, 100. That was my first big passion, big hobby at age of 5. I was just started to be a diehard baseball fan.
And when did you know that the pro dreams were dead? Maybe they're still alive. Maybe you're secretly playing double A ball somewhere. But
Yeah,
when did you know?
probably junior year of high school, I decided to stop playing. I probably could have made varsity. Didn't like the coach. Was like, we're gonna go play tennis, and I was like,
There you
oh,
go.
this is a real end to the dream. But I think in hindsight it worked out. But that was a tough one to stomach at the time.
Well, you'll be like 70 years old, still playing tennis. So I think you think a good decision with some foresight there.
100%.
What was the first paying job that you ever had?
Paying job, paperboy, probably.
Take me through the life of a paper boy growing up in Boston. What does that mean?
It means it was very easy. I it was 20 minutes a day. They would drop the Salem Evening News on my doorstep. So I went at like 5 a.m. after school. It had to have been after school. Yeah, after school, I think I would deliver the newspaper. In hindsight, I don't know why people were okay with getting the newspaper at like 3:30 in the afternoon. Now that I think about it, but yeah, I was a paper boy, so that was it. Was you know the street I lived on and the street next door. So it wasn't at the time. It seemed like hard work.
Yeah, of course. But so you got a messenger bag and maybe your bike, or you doing it on foot?
I did the bike. I did with the Walkman on. It wasn't people had like very specific places where they wanted the newspaper. So as much as I wanted to be the guy who was like throwing the newspaper like you see in the movies, that wasn't an option for me. And if
Life
put it
just
in,
won't let you throw.
yeah, exactly. Real tragedy.
All right. So then, any other odd jobs or things you did in like early years or high school?
Yeah, I started working for the Red Sox, but it wasn't a paid job. So I instead of kind of following the baseball playing career, I started working for them when I was like 12, 13, doing kind of like cute little kid stuff around the ballpark. So that was kind of the first foray into into not even the corporate world, just into the sports world on that level. And they paid me in tickets. My first year was 2003. They made the American League Championship, lost tragically. My next year was they won in 2004. I got to go to all the playoff games, so that was a pretty amazing run from from my little corporate 12-year-old career.
Absolutely. How did you get a job with the Red Sox when you're 12 years old?
Yeah, it's odd. I was such a baseball nerd. They used to have this ticketing event every year, not season tickets, but you could buy single game tickets, and people would camp out overnight. I don't want to say it was like pre-internet, but it was before like people were buying, the concept of like the virtual waiting room and all that. So people would come to the ballpark. They'd like stay overnight in line. They get wristband. They'd bring them into one of the premium areas. It was called the 406 Club at the time, and Red Sox had just been bought a couple years before, and an ownership group who came over from San Diego, CEO, EVP, and the EVP was kind of emceeing an event inside the premium club with players and Q&A and trivia. And I was such a baseball nerd that I really, I think I made an impression. And baseball was kind of still kind of is, but it was definitely an old man sport at the time. We got to chatting, and my dad kind of said like, "Hey, I know you guys are trying to get more kids involved. Like, I've seen what the new ownership group's doing. Like, any way you can like have some involvement in the ball club." And you know, he brainstormed. Awesome guy named Dr. Charles Steinberg. So it was him and his VP Sarah McKenna, who both of them I'm still relatively in touch with, which is amazing. And they got me to put on I'd get the lineups card from the manager for the day from each manager, and then I'd be going out of like the main door on Yawkey Way, which is like the strip right in front of the ballpark. I'd walk out the front door with the mascot, this big, like huge animated front door, and I'd in like an old 1946 Red Sox uniform, and I'd write the starting lineups, kind of like an old school like throwback to like the early like 1900s when they would do that in an old timey Red Sox uniform. So it was amazing. That guy, Dr. Charles, he's been a mentor to a lot of people. So it's funny because the there's like three of us that I think of in like this group, and it's me, uh, Theo Epstein, who was probably one of the most famous GMs in baseball history. He came onto the Red Sox and he was 27 and won the World Series, and then won another one, and then won one in Chicago. And there's a guy named Alex Edelman, who's a relatively famous comedian now. He won it on, it has an HBO special. So Alex and I worked together at the Red Sox, and then Theo is obviously one of the baseball greats. So it's a bit funny that they're doing baseball GM, famous comedian, and I'm in RevOps, but no complaints.
Hey, you're doing great. You're doing great in RevOps. Okay, so how long did you do that job? I mean, that's incredible. I would imagine did that ever even feel like work when you're 12? Doing something consistently is tricky, but did you do that for a while?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. They were so nice to me. It was like when I wanted to do it, I could do it. So I do it on the weekends. If there's a weekday game I wanted to do it at, we would they'd give us tickets, they'd hook it up, um, and it would basically tickets in exchange for me going to the ballpark and doing that. I did that probably till I was like 14, maybe probably 15, and then we were talking about like what's next, and they were just starting to get their kid fan club off the ground. They had Red Sox Nation. They were trying to get Red Sox Kid Nation off the ground. They had like 30,000 members, but they wanted kid reporters for their newsletter and kind of like some of their written content. So me and Alex Edelman started doing writing for them, doing interviews, doing experiences, and being able to write about it. It was basically me pitching things I wanted to do to them and then writing about it. So like watching, a game from inside the Green Monster, the Red Sox kind of famous left field wall, going to spring training and talking to players. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. You get some good experience writing, developing content, like putting
Yeah.
yourself out there.
I think it got me into college. My grades were my grades were decent, but where I went to college, they really wanted me to be a comm major and like join their like communications fellowship program. So I think that definitely played a part in me getting the job or
Yeah,
me
and I want to talk about
college.
that makes sense. And I want to talk about that next. So you eventually go to Elon,
Yeah.
and so you get there, you've had this incredible baseball experience. Do you know like what you want to do at that point? Do you have a vision for your career?
No, I think, and I made a mistake along the way too. Like I knew I wanted to be in sports, but I had no idea what I wanted to do, and that's not necessarily a way to like choose a career. It worked out. Don't get me wrong, but I was going to be a communications major. I did one communications class. It was too creative and not enough writing, and I'm like, you know what? We're gonna pivot to business. If I want to be in sports, it'll give me the background I need. So after a semester, I transferred to business. I still kept doing some of the communication stuff, like the sports radio and sports TV show that Elon had, which was amazing, and a lot of my best friends are still are from that world. But yeah, I basically interviewed I interned with the Red Sox freshman year of college in somewhat of a corporate role, and that was really my foray into like the front office there, where I started to like actually build relationships because the person who was under kind of my mentor at the time became my boss. So, or at least during the internship. And then I was in her department all through college for 4 years and the year after. And then moved into a real corporate job there.
And so what does that look like? So you graduate college and then you come back to work for the Red Sox in like a full-time, more traditional role?
Yeah, it was not yet because I was like still trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I knew like I was in the department called Fan Services and Entertainment. They do all the pregame entertainment, like the pregame ceremonies. They do some customer service and things like that. But they have like Red Sox emails. They're sitting in the front office 9 to 5, like doing corporate stuff. So it was like a cool opportunity for someone, in their like teens, early 20s. But when I came out of college, I was trying to figure out what was next. So they had me write the scripts for the public address announcer before every game. He would go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Fenway Park. And then he'd have this long pregame script about the first pitch and all the ceremonies. And if it's a special day, Memorial Day or 9/11 or opening day or whatever, maybe there'd be some really cool opportunity to write some really creative stuff in there and hear your voice. So it felt cool to be like the ghostwriter at Fenway Park for a year. But then
Any that you remember? Any favorites?
I think that's a great question. Anything where I could add kind of some creative license in there, like any special ceremony, because oftentimes it was boilerplate. You have the people who are coming with groups who you introduce. You have first pitches by corporate partners, but like I'm trying to think. Rob Reiner was a first pitch one year, so I got to introduce him, and we had a guy Meb who won the Boston Marathon, first American in forever to win the Boston Marathon. Yeah. So I got to pick him up at the airport as part of like the fan services department, and then also write the script for the public address announcer there. And he had just won the Boston Marathon a couple days earlier, so people were super excited, and it gave me some cool experience and some cool experiences.
And so, what's it like when you transition into sales?
Man, I had one. I got that job because people liked me. Like I was not good at sales. I'm indebted to my boss that I got good. I definitely got good, but I had no sales experience. We got on an interview, and I was an internal candidate. We had just started this sales academy, kind of an inside sales SDR program. But it's such a good pathway into that world that I was like, sure, I'll try it out. I got on that interview. It was basically a role play, and the interviewer, my future boss, David Baggs, was like, you know what, that wasn't good, but I'm going to give you another try. Like, why don't you do some research on sales and how kind of sales works and best practices, and then maybe we'll try again in a couple of days. And I think he only did that because he had heard from other people internally that whether it's a work ethic thing or just being a good kid. And I didn't totally know what I was doing the next time, but I kind of asked more questions and held more of a real sales call. And he gave me a job, and I learned a ton. I was there for 2 awesome years, and a lot of my friends are now VP of ticketing with the Vancouver Canucks, head of ticketing with the Portland WNBA team, Madison Square Garden. They're all over, so that's pretty cool to see them.
And so that job is selling ticket packages and suites and things like that. What do you remember about when you actually get into the mix? So they're taking a chance on you, but now you're actually like selling, right? You have a quota presumably for a couple of years. What is that life like for you?
It was hard, man. Like, I was making $30,000 a year, maybe $40,000 after commission. It's hard. I don't think the job was not particularly hard compared to some of SDR roles now. So I have so much respect for SDRs in the tech world. I'm calling someone who came to 6 games last year, and I get to say I'm from the Red Sox, and they're kind of excited. It's not the standard cold call. I'm not asking them about home insurance. We're talking baseball a little bit, and I get to talk about my favorite place, Fenway Park. You get some people who are jerks, but generally it was not a difficult call. I got to be really good at it because I know the team, I know the ballpark, I know every seat in that ballpark, and I could sell it well. But the money wasn't great. The hours are tough. It's a 162 game season, so 81 home games, and it takes up your whole summer. So it's a grind. But man, it was so much fun. We were in Fenway Park, where the Red Sox play, is the oldest ballpark in Major League Baseball. It's built in 1912, and when the Sales Academy started, they were across the street. You'd have to walk literally through an elevator, an old freight elevator, just to get into that room. There'd be if it would rain, the roof would leak. So there's photos I have of people making cold calls with umbrellas over their head, and they've since upgraded. But it built a lot of character. Some of those people are my closest friends, and it was an amazing 2 years.
Yeah, well, you obviously got through it. You're obviously good at it, because then you go and do it for MSG.
Yeah.
So what was that transition like?
It was interesting. I never wanted to leave the Red Sox or Boston, but to move up in the sports world, it's not like a startup. These companies aren't growing, 15, 20% year over year. Things are pretty stagnant. For you to move up, someone has to leave. They're not often creating new roles and new jobs. So, I had friends who went to random places in middle America, and I didn't want to do that. I got reached out to by head of sales for Madison Square Garden in 2016. Uh, Took the train down there to interview for an account executive job, selling group tickets mostly. Uh, I'd never really been to New York. I'd done like a day trip here and there, but not as like kind of a full grown adult. And once I did that, it was cool. And I think the allure of like a brand like Madison Square Garden, the Red Sox, like not going to like a small hockey team in Texas, it was an appeal, and being in a city where I know a lot of people. So it was a hard decision, but like to move up in that world, you have to jump around from team to team.
Do you have a particular like prospect or customer story from your time selling, whether at MSG or the Red Sox, that like most stands out to you?
Yeah. There was a lobbyist who worked in DC, and he was on this Red Sox season ticket wait list, which is basically you pay $50 once and you get a priority. We call you first when things open up. And generally the best seats never open up. So like the first two rows between first and third base, so behind home plate, those never open up. And if they do, the existing season ticket holders would generally have like the first right of refusal to move up. And that's always easier than trying to find somebody net new anyways. But for some reason they reached the sales department, and I call this guy, and he's a lobbyist, and it's four tickets at like $55,000 a ticket for 81 games. So it's $250. Ended up being like $240K a year, over a 5-year contract. And it was not a hard sale, which is like, which is wild. It wasn't a one call close, but I made a $800,000, $1 million sale in kind of net revenue, like 250K ARR, which was pretty cool. So that's definitely the one that stands out to me. The commission rates weren't as generous as I was hoping for, so I didn't ball out, but it was a pretty cool experience.
I always love asking people that question because they always remember the exact numbers from like 10 years ago.
Yeah,
They can
totally.
still tell you.
I'll never forget that of the guy's name. Wild.
All right. So you're selling for MSG, and then you make this transition that then kind of foreshadows what comes next, and you move into operations. Tell me about the moment when you decided to move into operations and how it came to be.
Yeah, man, it's actually really interesting, and I don't mind talking about it, but it's a little darker than people would expect. So, my mom passed away
Hmm.
unexpectedly in 2018, and at that moment, like a week later, I went back to work just to kind of regain some normalcy, and the role had changed quite a bit. It used to be more relationship based, and new management had come in. They wanted it to be on the phone 80 days a week, 80 calls a day. So they also took commission away and made commission based on like sales and activity. So it was just a bizarre time, but I wasn't happy in the role. So I went to my VP. I couldn't really do the smile and dial thing at the time. So I went to my VP, Christy, who was a godsend. And I said, look, like she knew what had happened. And I said, I'm having trouble. Like, is there anything I can do at least temporarily to help kind of come to work and fill the gap, like any gaps that you have in the department? And she said, well, we really need someone to do sales operations, crunch numbers and kind of do some Excel work and see what's working, where we should sell it to, what's not working, look at our team numbers. So I put myself through Excel boot camps, data analysis boot camps, and was lucky enough to like make somewhat of a difference. I think she was just super sympathetic to what had happened, and she coached me. She was awesome, and you know that got me into the sales operations world in 2018, 2019. It was the thing that really was able to like make me allow me to make that shift.
And was there a moment where it clicked? Because obviously, yeah, obviously you're very good at it. You continued to kind of move up the ranks in it. Did you know that it was the right thing after a amount of time?
I knew sales wasn't, and I knew that I had interest in data analysis and strategy, but I didn't necessarily know how to get the strategy without having that background. And I wouldn't say it clicked. I think it probably clicked more at my next role than anything else, but it wasn't there. I still 100% felt you know, uh, like a pretender. Like, I was reporting into a VP of sales. It was a unique
Hmm.
structure, so I didn't necessarily have like the internal guidance or ability to learn, but it did open up a ton of new doors for me.
And I want to talk about that next. So was it hard to leave? Well, you ultimately left sports, moved into the tech world. Was that a tough transition?
It was a lot of my closest friends had left Madison Square Garden at that time. Again, because the same reasons I mentioned, weird time there. So people were like just trying to find other options outside of MSG. And I was having a bit of a crisis of like, well, what do I do? How do I even like, I either can move into a sales operations role in sports, which means I probably have to leave New York because there aren't that many of them. And the odds of one opening up in New York are slim, or I need to leave sports and like move into like tech. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what matters to you right now? Is it what are your priorities? And that's kind of how I think about it. At that time, my priorities had changed. They were better work life balance, better career trajectory, and staying in New York and finances. So I decided I would try to move into tech. And I knew that was gonna be a hard leap because it's not that comparable. So I kind of was hoping someone would take a chance on me, and luckily that happened. But like, I had talked to a bunch of people after that from Madison Square Garden who also were trying to make that shift because they were feeling the same thing, or they wanted their priorities had shifted similarly, and they were like, all right, well, how do I do this? It's a big gap, it's a big jump.
Yeah. So then when you actually get into the tech world, is it a brilliant surprise? Like, oh, I don't have to work Saturday night and I get free snacks? Or is it like, well, this is not as fun as it was in sports with the mystique behind me? What was the transition like?
So the Red Sox were an amazing company to work for. I had so much fun. Some of it's probably 100% nostalgia too. Madison Square Garden just wasn't a great place to work at the time. I've heard it since got a lot better. You know, it was just very, very old school corporate.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, just like gray cubicles and just very like I think like 1980s New York. And yeah, I move into tech and they have, this huge open office space with snacks and catered lunches and gave me a Mac laptop and they gave me Bose headphones if I want to focus during. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like I've never been, it was a 1 year of that honeymoon phase of just like, I've never been treated this well. And, it's good. You got to produce obviously. So it's a double-edged sword, but yeah, it was a pretty awesome like month or two of like, wow, things are different.
Did you find yourself having to tell anybody who'd never been outside of tech how good they had it? Like they didn't know?
It's a good question. I don't even think, I think, I'm sure I did because I felt like I was on cloud nine. That company really took care of me. My boss there really was my first real mentor in this space. So I was blessed to be there and be there at the time I was.
Yeah, it's good. And what about the actual like work? So obviously it's clicked because you stayed in that world for a while. What was different about the day-to-day responsibilities that you had of, running a tech?
Yeah, my boss, Jason, was head of global sales operations. He basically was like, "Hey, we're handing you the keys to Salesforce." I had never used Salesforce before. Like we use sports is late to the Salesforce game. Sports is generally late on all tech from a corporate standpoint. Yeah, he knew that. Well, let's send you to like a boot camp for a week, Salesforce, admin camp for a week, and I learned it. I learned everything Salesforce, and was able to admin the tool. Was able to do, it was an entry level sales ops role. But the first month I was there, he decided to shift us to revenue operations. So we brought in a consultant who I'm still really close with, and he's another one of my mentors in the space. And he has his own consulting company, which has been crushing it. Uh, and I got to be a part of them building out this full funnel from top of funnel marketing all the way through renewal and churn and everything in between. So it was I didn't play a huge part in it yet, but it got to have a front row seat to it. And it was pretty incredible. It just set me up for everything that's happened since.
Yeah, you've since done like very kind of early stage rep ops work. It looked like at the companies that you've worked for. What has been your approach in these later roles where you now have kind of come in and laid the foundation before? It sounds like you learned an approach from that consultant. Like when you're first RevOps hire or one of the early RevOps hires now, how are you thinking about instituting what you need to?
I think the way I first think about everything is all architecture.
Mm.
For the very first thing I try to like, I have to come in and understand the business, obviously, but there are just certain things, like from an architectural standpoint, that like are non-starters, like uh, making sure the sales process is set up accurately, timestamps on stage entrances, hardcore exit and entry criteria, documentation. How are we looking at intent or top of funnel, like marketing engagement? There's just certain architectural decisions that I need to make to help set the company up to scale. But I think it's coming in and kind of getting a lay of the land. I never want to be that person coming in, uh, you know, like uh, coming in too hot. There's a book I read called First 90 Days that talks about like just being a sponge your first 90 days and meeting with people and understanding your stakeholders and just understanding the corporate culture of that company. So I've been very careful to not come in too hot and try to upset the status quo versus understand why things are and make recommendations on architectural changes or scale or what can I do to get up to speed quickly and then make impact quickly.
That makes sense. And now that this has become your craft, like what are you most curious about for the future, whether it's the future of the role or the tech or like what you're most interested in learning next?
Yeah, I think where I'm at now, and I think a lot of people go through this. I'm at my company is 65 people or so, but it's probably heavy go to market. So maybe probably 50% of that on the go to market side. So I have a lot of stakeholders, and we're starting to get low bandwidth. And I'm a team of one, so it's low bandwidth right now, which means that there's a lot of technical needs, there's a lot of stakeholder needs, and
Mm.
I find myself being less able to be as proactive as I'd like. I find myself less being able to be as strategic as I like. I think RevOps magic really happens when you can start being more of an advisor on strategy and numbers and what you're seeing. For me, I've always just like something clicked a couple years ago where I'm like, it's the CEO, it's the CRO. Of course, he knows these numbers about conversion rates and you know pipeline, and I'm like, no, they don't. So like, you know, even if I have a dashboard, like I'm now it's I've learned how to operate in that world more. So for me, like the biggest thing I'm doing is, well, how can I free up my bandwidth to
Mm.
help kind of be more proactive and move the ball forward, have less fire drills. But I think every one person RevOps team deals with this in one way or another.
No, that makes total sense. That challenge resonates with me for sure. So if you go back to young Eli coming out of Elon or going to MSG, you can pick whichever one you want to talk to. What would be your main advice that you give to your younger self?
Enjoy enjoy the ride a little more. Uh, I think there are a lot of people who are driven, and when you have a lot of drive, it can be hard to enjoy the process. And you're just
Mm.
looking at the next, what's next, what's next, what's next. And I think only over the last year or two have I been really able to be like, enjoy the process. And I think that comes with trusting yourself and how you can operate in like a corporate environment and deal with stakeholders and just have faith that you'll figure it out on difficult things. But if you take your career seriously, it can be easy to keep pressing and keep pressing and keep your foot on the gas. And I think it's a fine line there. So you need a little bit of both. I would have said chill out a little bit and enjoy the ride. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And my last question is what is a piece of content, so it could be book, movie, podcast that you find yourself recommending to everyone? Bonus points if it's not business related. This is just meant to be honestly, it's a very selfish question. I just try to
Yeah,
aggregate everyone's like number one favorite.
totally. Both my parents were psychotherapists, so talk therapists. So I've always had a ton of interest in mental health. There's a book called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, and it's basically like how you're programmed just from like when you're young, like how people are talking to you, and then how that's kind of shapes how you talk to yourself. And oftentimes, if people step back and realize how they're talking to themselves, it's not in a great way. And there's this concept of like, well, would you talk that way to a friend if a friend was struggling, or would you be more supportive? But it's also just about like deconditioning yourself because it's such a habit of how you talk to yourself based off how things have been structured in your entire life from when you were a baby, a kid growing up, and then how you've done it for yourself as you've been an adult. So that's the one that I've always come back on. I try to reread it every now and then. Any of those things can be really hard to stick, but that
Yeah.
one doesn't seem like a more that there are some that are just a flash in the pan, kind of like motivational things. This is like more scientific, and I find myself catching myself saying like, okay, like be a little nicey to yourself. Reminders of just kind of talk to you, be a friend to yourself. So that's probably the
Yeah.
one that sticks out most.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna read that. Thank you.
It's a good one.
Eli, thank you for the conversation. It was great to get to talk to you and hear your story. And I'm sure we'll see you around at some events here soon.
100%, Kevin. Really appreciate it, man.